Inflation. The problem of inflation is as old as market system. The problem of inflation has received a more serious attention since the early 1970s. The persistent inflation and the problems associated with inflation have claimed more attention of the economists, policymakers and politicians than any other macroeconomic problem. According to Milton Friedman, inflation is a process of a steady and sustained rise in the prices. According to Johnson, inflation is an increase in the quantity of money faster than real national output is expanding. Characteristics of inflation as they emerge from the above mentioned definitions of inflation. First, inflation is characterized by an excess of demand or an increase in costs or usually both. Second, true inflation or pure inflation starts only reaching the full employment level. Third, inflation is a subject of rising prices. Desirable rate of inflation. Moderate rate of inflation is considered to be desirable and acceptable for at least three reasons. A moderate rate of inflation keeps the economic outlook optimistic, promotes economic activities. Second, it is helpful in the mobilization of resources by increasing the overall rate of saving and investment. Third, it is historically evident that some increase in the general price level is inevitable in a dynamic and progressive economy. A price rise of 2 to 3% per annum in the developed and 4 to 5% per annum in the developing economies is generally considered as the desirable rate of inflation. Thank you. Inflation is generally classified on the basis of its rate and causes. On rate basis, inflation is classified as moderate inflation, when the price of goods and services rise at a single digit rate annually. It is predictable. The moderate rate of inflation may vary from country to country. Galloping inflation, an inflation that proceeds at an exceptionally high rate. The rates of price growth that are higher than those of moderate inflation. Dangerous for the economy. Hyperinflation, when inflation rates exceed 50%. Leads to the collapse of an economy as the purchasing power of money falls continuously. Paper currency becomes worthless. Classification on the basis of degree of government control. Inflation can be divided into two parts. First, open inflation, when there is no control on the rising prices and prices are free to find their own level. The inflation under this condition is called open inflation. Second, suppressed inflation. In spite of price control measures, price do rise and inflation does take place but at a rate lower than the potential rate in the open system. This kind of inflation is called suppressed inflation. Classification on the basis of political conditions. On the basis of political conditions, inflation is classified into three categories. First, wartime inflation, inflation that takes place during the course of war called wartime inflation. Second, post-war inflation. Prices continue to rise even after the war as government has to spend large amount on the repair and reconstruction. Third, peacetime inflation. Underdeveloped countries need large resources for economic planning and it leads to rise in prices which is popularly known as peacetime inflation. Classification on the basis of scope. On the basis of scope, inflation is divided into two categories. First, sectoral inflation, when inflation affects only a particular part of the country or affect only one or two things like petrol, onion, etc. Second, comprehensive inflation, when inflation affects the entire country and all goods, then it is called comprehensive inflation.